Welcome everyone, it's Shari Carroll for SimonsStamp.com, and I have a DIY project where I'm going to use some alcohol inks on some rocks. First, I'm going to show you some of the rocks that we have around here. We have quite the collection. We used to live in California, and one day we were at the beach, and my son Brooks had to have this rock to bring home. And so then I painted little Christmas trees on it because we always had the doors open in the wintertime in California. This has been our doorstop for 30 years, and it has a nice little edge that catches the door, and it also has a really nice flat bottom, which is perfect just to set on the floor. So this is our rock collection, and I just thought I would show you as I go through this. Also, my husband works outdoors, and so he brings home a lot of like river rock and some flat stones, and so those line our garden. He's also been very sweet to collect heart rocks for me, and so I have a collection of heart rocks that he's brought me over the years. For my project today, I'm just going to use what I have, and I'm going to show you how you can prime them and then use some alcohol inks to decorate them. So you don't have to really find special rocks, but you may want to find some that you might want to keep in the house or use as a doorstop or just as a display. Sometimes you see those rocks that are stacked together, and those are really nice. So the first thing I'm going to do, or that I did, is I cleaned these off and dried them really well, and I let them sit out in the sun. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit, so I'm going faster. But what I want to do to get ready is I'm using a piece of foil and I'm crumpling that up and putting it underneath. That way these will sit a little bit flatter. These rocks aren't completely free of flaws. There are some cracks and divots and stuff, to where these paints and stuff are going to go into these little areas. But I'm just starting off with Tim Holtz Distress Picket Fence paint, and I'm going to paint a couple layers. You can use a layer of gesso if you want to cover them up, and I'm wanting these to be white because they're such a dark stone, and once I put the alcohol inks on, I want them to be completely white. But if you use gesso, use a second layer of just acrylic paint over top. That way it'll be nice and smooth. We know that gesso has kind of tooth to it, and the alcohol inks won't spread out as well on the gesso. So, but you can use that to coat it to get it, white or close to white, and then use a layer of regular paint. So I've let my rocks dry overnight. They're still a little bit cool, but that's fine. And I've picked out some alcohol inks that of the colors that I really like. I have some blending solution and also 91% alcohol in this little bottle. And you'll see me going between those two. I've also picked out a couple alloys and a bottle of pearl, and you make sure that you shake those up. So I'm just going to remove all the lids to these and get myself ready to do some painting. Another thing you'll see me use is the Tim Holtz air blower, and I'll be using that once I get my inks good and wet and they start to move around the rock. So I'm just going to get started. This first color is Laguna. I do have all my supplies in the description box below if you ever question what I'm using. But I'm going to use the alcohol just to lighten the inks up and get them a little bit more fluid. And then once I have a lot on here, then I'll go back in and use blending solution, and that is to mix them together or to blend them together. So they have a different purpose. So the alcohol is going to lighten the color and the blending solution is going to blend them. So right now it looks pretty streaky, and I was thinking, ooh, is this going to work or not? So then I decided to go in and make this a little bit more fluid by adding a lot of the alcohol on top and start to move it around. I found that the more ink that I have, the easier it was to add more color and to get more differences. So I just continued on, and as long as it was wet, everything flowed well together. And so right now I'm using a pearl, and you'll see it start to react as it goes down. Then a little blending solution just to mix that up a little bit. And I'll go back in with other ink colors and continue adding color. So a couple times I'll move this around, but most of the streaks are following that rock, going down towards that bottom right. And if you have a problem like that, you can readjust your foil to where maybe that sits a little bit more upright. But I'm just going to continue on. This was really fun just to play with these inks and to see what they would do. One of my concerns is that I use alcohol to clean my brushes and clean up my work surface after I've used acrylic paint. and I was afraid the paint might kind of pull up using the alcohol. It didn't. It just stayed still. So make sure that you let your rocks dry completely before you go ahead and put on your alcohol inks. At this point, it is starting to look much better than what it did when I first started. It was a little bit scary in the beginning, but as I continue to work with it, add more color, add more alcohol, add the blending solution, work things around with the paintbrush a little bit, it's starting to really come to life as I'm building up those layers. So right now I'm adding some of the sterling alloys, and this will give me a really nice sheen. And I'm putting a little bit of blending solution in there to start thinning those out a little bit and then some color on top. Working with the little paintbrush is really helpful if you have dark areas or you want to move some of your areas around. I haven't cleaned the brush off, I'm just going in through and just moving things around. Also, as the rock sits, there's a little bit of underhang, and the brush really helps to start working in under those areas so that you don't see the white or the black of the stone. And now I'm starting to use the air blower, which is really fun because it starts to really mix things up, and I get those lighter areas from that alcohol ink. It's also spreading those alloys around to where I'm getting these really bright silver areas. I will say that once I started adding the layers and I had it completely coated and started adding more alcohol and colors on top, everything started flowing around a lot easier, and especially with using that air blower, I could move it around to exactly where I wanted it. If you're trying this and you get into a place where you really don't like how it's looking, just keep working with it and choose some colors that really go well together. I really love the blues, the purples, and a little bit of green. Those always blend really well together. But you may want to try your own colors and try new colors together. If you don't like what you have, you can always kind of clean it off with some alcohol and just start again. So it's a no fail process. So just keep going until you like what you see. At this point, I really like how my rock looks, and I have a little bowl, and I've just put some of that alcohol into that bowl, dipped my paintbrush in, and now I'm just splattering it with some dots of alcohol. And this will remove some of the ink and give me kind of the raindrop look. So I'm going to lift this up so you can see how this looks up close. I really like how it turned out. One thing I will tell you, if you want to display these outside, you can get some polyurethane, and that's usually a water base, and you can seal your rocks up with that if you want to keep them outside. So I'm starting on to my little heart, and I'm using wild plum to get started, and I've used a little bit of alcohol and that air blower, and then I can start adding some more color. So I'm going in with the purple. This is going to dominate. Purple is very strong, so make sure you use it just kind of sparingly. But I'll work around with it and lighten that up, and that air blower is blowing that around to the side and down to where it kind of goes underneath a little bit. What's nice about using blending solution and alcohol is that it will lighten areas, especially if they're really dark. So here I'm introducing a little bit of sepia. And sepia is a rich orange that will mix really well with the wild plum. And now I'm starting to drop in some of the color that I used in my first rock, like the Laguna and some of the other blues and greens. And this is giving me a really nice look. I'm going to just try to lighten up some of those line areas by just putting just a little bit of alcohol on and then using that air blower, and that just moves everything around and it gives me other rings. So it's giving me light and dark areas. And to break up some of the purple, I'm adding Laguna on top of that and a little bit of alcohol, and I'll blow that around. And you can see how that really mixes well together. So I just have to tell you just to have no fear and just continue playing. And again, like I'm using that little paintbrush to move things around and to lighten up some of those areas. Having that foil underneath really helps me to be able to turn this around and adjust it to where I can get the other sides, because I want to make sure I get all the sides done before I complete this. So I can turn that around just every few minutes and make sure I need some down on this side. So I've just added some pearl green, and this makes a really unusual color between the orange and the pink. But by adding a little bit more Laguna, that could have been a really problem area for me, but by adding that Laguna in, it just kind of broke that up a little bit and gave me a really nice color combo. Okay, I am just about done with this. I'm going to add a little bit more Laguna to the top. That is my favorite color, that nice turquoise color, and just using that air blower to finish this up. One of the things I will do is make sure I clean up those dark lines that are in between where the blue and the purple meet together, and making sure I have those bottom edges done and blowing that around. And finally, I am just adding a few dots of the alcohol just to the top by giving that a little splat. So here's a up close look of the photos that I took of these rocks. It looks really nice and shiny, even though it has those imperfections in the rock. I really love how my heart rock turned out and it has little dimples, almost like little freckles on that. So I hope I've given you some inspiration to look in your garden, pull out some rocks, clean them up a little bit, throw on some paint, and then have a fun play day with some alcohol inks. I hope you've enjoyed this process as much as I have, and as always, thanks so much for joining me.